Hello.
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 Hi there.
Hello, and welcome to the RadioTimes.com Doctor Who podcast. I'm Morgan. Hugh is on holiday this week, so I'm joined by...
Patrick. Hello.
And we'll be discussing Series 12, Episode 4, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Fantastic title, but did the episode live up to it? Patrick, what were your thoughts on the episode?
I actually thought it was a really, really good episode. I think after a slight disappointment of last week, I think there's a kind of maybe trepidation about whether this one would kind of go be returned to form, and I thought it really was. I think the kind of historical setting of this episode was kind of perfect for Doctor Who, and I think they kind of, really knocked it out of the park this week.
Yeah, well, it's by a writer new to the show, Nina Mativier, who is best known for creating the teen thriller series The A-List, which was on, I think, BBC iPlayer over here and Netflix internationally. But interestingly, she also served as a script editor on a couple of Doctor Who stories in 2018, The Woman Who Fell to Earth and It Takes You Away. And this one, it's a fairly simple story if you kind of strip it back and boil it down. But I thought it played out with a lot of style, a lot of charm, had a fast pace. I enjoyed that we were introduced to the story sort of via Tesla and Dorothy Skithra, and then we joined the Doctor and Companion sort of mid-adventure.
Yeah.
And then we get thrown right into the midst of the madness. And I think you're right, episode 2, we sort of dipped into history a little bit, but this was our first real trip back into history. And I thought it had a real, or this series, and I thought it had a real sort of sense of atmosphere. Yeah,
even kind of when we're introduced to the companions and they're all dressed up in their kind of period kind of garb.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a kind of quite funny to see, especially kind of Bradley Walsh all kind of donned up in his
Tosin Cole as well, going full Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. Yeah, no, fantastic costume work this week. I thought, going back to last week, again, one of the problems with it was I thought the production design was just really lackluster.
Yeah.
It looked a bit naff, for lack of a better word. And I thought Doctor Who more than made up for it this week. As you say, wonderful costumes, really great blend of CGI and location work. I thought the whole sort of representation of Gilded Age New York was actually fantastically realised.
Yeah, absolutely, and also kind of we've got this kind of location period work, but also on the other hand, then when you kind of go into the Skithra kind of spaceship, that's also kind of, I think, a really quite kind of atmospheric and quite kind of scary. Shot to be quite a scary kind of thing, I think, and more scary, I think, than anything we saw last week.
Right. Yeah. Well, episode 3, there was a lot of talk about how scary the monsters were going to be. The dregs. They were apparently one of the scariest monsters of all time, and that was meant to be one of the scariest episodes of all time. I don't think it really lived up to that. Didn't seem to be generally a very popular episode. And then this week's episode, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, we've not heard so much about it. Like we were saying before, there's not been a lot of pre-hype about this episode. But I thought it was, first of all, a really strong episode, but also the monsters were way, way scarier than anything we saw last week. Particularly, you were saying, when they're in their human form.
Yeah, because we kind of see them in their kind of basic form. They're kind of scorpion-esque, kind of like,
right,
and that's kind of a little bit scary. But I think, when the kind of truly Night of Terror comes into it, the terror comes into it is when they kind of adopt the persona of a human and kind of just a human with kind of lit up eyes. And it's quite haunting, really, I think, the way they kind of approach kind of the gang. Yeah,
I know they're not possessing these people; they're sort of like copying their image, but there's that sort of like hint of possession. It's all quite disturbing, and I think there's something sort of specifically unsettling as well about monsters in sort of period garb.
Exactly. No, it does.
It's kind of got like a ghostly sort of
ghost
paranormal
story,
aspect to it as well. We should talk about the guest cast, who again I thought were fantastic. So Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror is sort of, I think, what's been termed as celebrity historical for Doctor Who, in the vein of Rosa, or going back further, The Unquiet Dead. And we've got Goran Visnik, who, as Tesla, who I thought was sort of immediately captivating and charismatic.
Yeah, definitely. I think playing Tesla is just a long list of actors who've played in the past. David Bowie, of course, played him in The Prestige, so it's quite a lot to live up to, really.
I was going to say, if you're talking charisma, Bowie is right up there.
But no, I thought it was really good, and it's a kind of role that could have kind of become a caricature, but I don't think it ever did. I think he was kind of quite commanding. Kind of, you could get the eccentricity of the character came across, but without ever kind of going into parody, I don't think.
No. Yeah, I'd agree. And I thought he had some really nice scenes as well with the Doctor. This episode is quite fast-paced and there's a lot of action, but what I really liked about it as well is it does take pause every once in a while to have a more emotional scene. So you have some nice scenes where the Doctor sort of finds a kindred spirit in Tesla. And Ryan as well. One of my problems with this series so far, and actually with the last series, is Ryan often gets cast as a bit of a clown. And he's just there to sort of clown around and provide the comic relief. And Tosin Cole is great at that, but I think he can do other stuff too. So it was nice to see him have a little scene in the TARDIS this week where they're sort of talking about how the Doctor and Tesla have impacted their lives.
Yeah, no, it was good. That kind of mutual admiration between the kind of characters as well. I think Chris Chibnall's gone on record to say that Tesla would seem like the kind of character or historical figure that the Doctor really would admire. And yeah, the way that kind of plays out, I think, is really kind of seems quite authentic and seems like it's not shoehorned in there. Like they would really kind of admire each other.
Yeah,
and I think it's done really well.
And I like this as well that this episode, it does deal with the fact that people might have heard of Tesla, but they might not be 100% familiar with everything he's done, the fact that he sort of electrified the world, and that in a way he wasn't respected in his own time, but his legacy has gone on to inspire so much. He's basically credited here as being the inventor of Wi-Fi in a roundabout sort of way. And I thought that was nice as well, the way it sort of touched on the fact that we might know who Tesla is, but not what he achieved, and we get that through the companions. They're like, well, I know he's an inventor, and then the Doctor, that gives like a nice way of the Doctor to sort of deliver some exposition and explain what he was responsible for.
But yeah, not in a kind of too on the nose fashion.
Yeah.
I think it seemed quite seamless. And
I think, for something like Rosa, I think most people know who Rosa Parks is. So if you kind of had to go, this is who Rosa Parks is, it would feel a bit more heavy-handed. But Tesla's like just familiar enough to be.
You kind of think of the car, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You might know the name, but not necessarily the man behind it. So it didn't feel as heavy-handed for the Doctor to be explaining to her things to her companions here. Yeah,
it's quite a nice message as well. Just kind of, even if you're not necessarily renowned in your own time or even renowned later, it doesn't mean that you've not had an impact. I think that's quite a good message. It's kind of almost kind of subtly put in there as well.
Yeah, no, I thought this episode had some nice messages. It has the message as well that creativity is important and putting your own sort of stamp on things is important, and that you shouldn't just
conform
or steal other people's ideas. Which is touched on obviously with Edison, is sort of like keeping an eye on Tesla and maybe cashing in a little bit on his inventions, but also obviously the Skithra are just these alien scavengers who are just stealing other people's tech and ideas.
So they've got a Silurian gun,
right? Which was a nice little nod back to the past. A few fans had spotted that in the promo images, the Silurian gun, and we were like, are they just reusing the same prop? That seems a little lazy, but we should have known better. It was a Silurian gun. But I really thought it was good this week how the sort of the aliens, the monsters, their themes sort of tied into the themes of the episode, which isn't always the case. Sometimes there's a storyline going on, and then the monsters, especially with historical, like as Rosa, as good as it was, the sort of alien threat, the villain, kind of felt a little
tacked on.
Whereas this week, the threat the aliens posed was specifically tied into the themes of the episode in terms of having your own ideas and not just stealing other people's.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it could have been a bit of an overload because obviously the Tesla Edison in itself is kind of, there's been a whole feature film about it recently, so that in itself is a big story. So I think it's good that as you say, the monster story accompanied that rather than kind of contradicting or just nicely kind of fit it all together.
Yeah, and you're right in that you could do a whole episode just with Tesla and not even have Edison in it.
Yeah.
And I must admit, when I heard they were doing both, I was like, well, that feels like a lot to cram in, and you're going to have to cram in a monster as well. But actually, I thought the balance was really good. And I thought we should talk about Robert Glenister as well, who played Edison. Yeah. I thought he was great as well, in again, quite a tricky role in that he's got to have this sort of balance of the early scenes where he's quite egotistic and quite unlikable. But then later on, you do see he actually has a heart.
Yeah, no, he was almost quite kind of Trumpian at the start. He was kind of like sounded a bit like Donald Trump, that kind of New York accent. But definitely, I think he kind of was. He was never like the most sympathetic character there. But obviously, then when you're comparing him to the proper evil of the monsters coming in, it was quite a nice kind of common enemy, kind of uniting them in the end, which was quite well.
And although the episode clearly seems to prefer Tesla to Edison, Edison is portrayed in a less flattering light. I did like that we did see the odd moment of humanity from Edison. There's the moment where all of his workers are killed. And he really seems to be upset by that. And his first thought is to contact their families, which I really like that because it's not, so many people obviously die in Doctor Who, and it's not often that someone thinks in that way. Although we get a moment like that, it's just like, oh, they're dead, but there are bigger things going on.
Yeah, they're collateral damage.
They're collateral damage, we move on. He was like, well, no, I just had dinner with this man's wife, and I need to tell his wife. That was, I thought, a really nice touch.
Definitely. There is one thing that I kind of thought was maybe a bit strange, which was when he first saw his kind of colleague coming in with the kind of red eyes, and he didn't recognise straight away that it wasn't it was a monster, really, which I thought was maybe a little bit, come on, surely this is a very smart guy, he's going to realise that straight away.
Yeah.
It's not,
He's just a bit like, you look like you maybe haven't, missed a nap or two.
Yeah. But that's nitpicking a little bit. Yeah.
And one other thing we should talk about as well in terms of the guest cast is the Scorpion Queen, the Queen Skithra, who is played by Anjli Mohindra.
Yeah, unrecognisable, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, that word gets thrown around a lot, doesn't it? They're totally unrecognisable, but really, in this case, she really is. So she, of course, very well-regarded actress. She's been in things like Bodyguard and Bancroft recently, but she was also Rani in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yeah.
I think started in 2008 and then was on that show for 3 years until it ended in 2011, and is returning to the Whoniverse here as a totally different character. And as you say, totally unrecognisable. Like, apparently Bradley Walsh actually
didn't recognise her.
And
he's of course also been in kind of Sarah Jane Adventures.
Good point. He was in her first 2 episodes of the Sarah Jane Adventures. Again, not playing Graham, playing a totally different character. And I think she thought he was just sort of doing his Bradley Walsh bit and pretending not to recognise her. And it was like, no, he actually doesn't know who she is. But I thought her performance was fun as well. I guess it's a role that you can only play it a certain number of ways. You're an evil alien Scorpion Queen. But I thought she was clearly having a lot of fun with it, and I quite enjoyed her performance.
Yeah, genuinely quite menacing, I think would be the word I would use to describe it.
Yeah.
Just even the way she delivered a few kind of monologues and stuff, and quite a menacing tone, which I thought was done really well.
Yeah, and you've never really seen her do anything quite like that before as well, so it was nice to see her get to do something different. Talking about the lead cast in this as well, I thought we saw a much darker side to the Doctor, not necessarily than we've seen this series, but I think Series 12 in general is kind of bringing out a much darker side. And I know that's something that fans have kind of clamoured for a little bit, is that we know Jodie Whittaker can do the kind of funny, zany side of the Doctor, and we've seen a lot of that. But I think there's a bit of a craving to see some of the darker side of the Doctor, to see her challenged a bit more. And I think with the revelations from Spyfall, with regards, Gallifrey and the Timeless Child, even though, those aren't touched on in any great detail here, there's still a sense, I think, that the Doctor is sort of slightly haunted by those.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, it's not the kind of safe, well, not safe of season 1, but there's definitely maybe a bit more jeopardy and a bit more, she's kind of, as you say, kind of a bit haunted. But,
And I think I made a note that angry Jodie is good Jodie. I think it's nice to see her get to do a bit more kind of like righteous indignation.
Yeah, and indignation, and we're still on her side as well, rather than, it's, as you say, it's not just anger for the sake of anger. It's kind of, it's coming from a place you can understand why, why she's reacting in that.
It doesn't feel forced. And I think she's great as well when she's given a sort of a powerful opponent to go up against in a scene. Or just someone to play off. So, I thought in Spyfall, going up against Sacha Dhawan as the Master, that really brought out the best in her Doctor.
Yeah.
And I think similarly, when she's going up against Queen Skithra, or even sort of when she's bantering back and forth with Tesla, I think those are when her Doctor really works, is when she's kind of going one-on-one
definitely
up against someone.
No, I almost want to see a spin-off Tesla and the Doctor series. Them exploring the I mean, maybe next companion can be.
Well, I mean, if Big Finish are listening, I'm sure they've got a 13th Doctor and Tesla mini-series all planned out. I like there was a sort of, she gets the kind of I'm the Doctor basically run moment, the kind of a little hark back to the 11th Hour Matt Smith. She kind of that moment where the Doctor, we've seen it a few times, where the Doctor kind of gives the alien a chance, and then is like, but if you don't take this chance, I'm going all in, and I will not show you mercy.
Yeah.
Which we've not seen a lot again from her Doctor. We've seen it previous Doctors, not so much her Doctor, and I thought it was nice to see that as well. And again, it doesn't go into huge detail on story arcs this week, but there is a little touch on what's happened to Gallifrey, where I think Skithra says, have you ever seen a dead planet?
And she says, more than you can count.
More than you can imagine, which, it's just kind of a Doctor-y line anyway. It kind of, the Doctor has seen a lot of, turmoil and planets destroyed and so on. But I think this was intended as, very specifically a reference back to Gallifrey. Yeah,
and even a reference back to last week's episode as well, on a kind of a smaller scale.
Actually, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. So I think it's nice how this series, I guess it's not going to be a heavy-handed arc. I think I would imagine the whole Timeless Child thing isn't going to pay off until the finale. Or Jodie Whittaker has said she might just be, dancing around the question, but I think she said it might not even be resolved this year. It might be next series
Yeah.
that it pays off. But I like that we're still sort of touching on it. It's not totally being ignored.
Yeah, I think it's good that it's not being ignored, but I also think it's good that it's not dominating. Because
Yeah,
I think
I'd agree.
these episodes like this week, you know, there could have been slightly more at the Timeless Child arc within it, but I think it would have taken away from this episode as a whole. I think this one really benefited from being a standalone story. Yeah, without getting too kind of muddied and too kind of brought into the whole mythology of the whole arc.
Yeah, that's the thing I'd really say about this episode is it's, you know, I don't necessarily think it will be held up as one of the all-time classics, but it was a really fun sort of standalone caper, which, you know, I think those things are harder to do than you might imagine. In many ways, sometimes it's probably easier to do, you know, a big grand premiere or a big grand finale, but just to do a kind of middle of the series, really strong standalone episode without any huge continuity elements or arc elements being paid off, that's actually quite hard, and this did that really well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just a kind of piece of trivia that I could add is that so Nikola Tesla actually did believe he was visited by aliens at one point, which I think Chris Chibnall said was one of the reasons they decided to do this. So it's obviously a fictionalized version, but it's not quite as fictionalized as you might imagine.
Is it though? Who knows? Who knows? We don't know. He's like you say, in real life, he claimed to have had contact with aliens. So maybe Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror really did occur. Maybe he really did meet the Doctor. I just have to get as well a shout out in for Graham's AC/DC joke.
Yeah,
where he calls Tesla and Edison AC.
Yeah, no, I thought he had quite a good kind of quite a few good kind of joking moments in this week, Graham. I think he would. Yeah, he's always got a few one-liners in there, but I think he was on form in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on in this episode, and so, you know, we've talked about in previous weeks how Series 12 is sort of dealing with the whole companion
kind of
dynamic,
juggling the cast,
juggling the main cast, and I think, you know, last week it didn't do it so well, and Spyfall did it quite well by splitting them up. This week they're mostly kept together.
Yeah, Yaz kind of has a bit more kind of with Tesla.
And that's the thing. I thought it did deal with the companions reasonably well this week. In terms of, you know, Graham gets his one-liners. Yaz gets a little sort of plot thread with Tesla and has some nice sort of emotional interactions with him. Likewise, you know, Ryan gets, as I said, his scene in the TARDIS and isn't just played as the clown, which is something I really, really appreciated. So I thought overall it was they weren't front and center, but I thought it dealt with the companions quite well this week.
Yeah, definitely. And I think having, you know, a couple of big guest stars rather than a whole massive cast of guest stars helped in that sense. Because it's not taking too much of the kind of focus away from them. They're not the main focus, but there's plenty of chances for them to be brought into the main story. Yeah,
I think this episode, you know, dealt with the guest stars far better than last week for a variety of reasons. You know, you've got two really major guest roles, so you fill those roles with really, really strong actors in Goran Visnik and Robert Glenister. And also, when you've got 4 leads, you don't need that many supporting characters.
Yeah.
It just clogs things up. So one of the problems last week as well was that there was about, like, I know the whole point was, you know, they were kind of on the run and they were being picked off one by one. So you do need, you know, a certain number of supporting characters, but we didn't get to know those characters. No. We didn't care when they died. There were too many of them. Just going on about Orphan 55 again. But this one had some, you know, really strong build up to the peril, so that, you know, we knew Tesla. We even felt like we knew Edison quite well before he was thrown into danger, just because we spent a little bit of time with him and the performances were kind of immediately arresting.
Exactly, and I think you could say that's because they're historical figures, but I don't actually think that's the case. I think it was because of the specific characterization in this episode.
I would agree. Like I think both Edison is maybe slightly better known in the general public than Tesla, but again, not really. I think people know his name, people know his accomplishments. They don't know what the man was like at all, or much of his history. I would guess. Yeah,
the general viewer, I don't think is gonna be particularly knowledgeable about the story.
No, it's not like Shakespeare or something where you might have a sort of association with the person. So I think the reason why we respond well to these characters is just the way they're written and the way they're played.
Yeah.
Well, that's about it for this week. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 5, Fugitive of the Jadoon, which is co-written by Chris Chibnall and Demons of the Punjab writer Vinay Patel. The Jadoon are back after 5 years away, and they've invaded Earth and are hunting for a fugitive. But who is it?
Intriguing.
But until then, stay tuned to radiotimes.com for all the latest Doctor Who news and features. I've been Morgan.
And I've been Patrick.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.